Did you know that Family Guy was actually dead and buried for 3 entire years? And that the show you're watching today only exists because of DVD sales and something called Adult Swim? If you think you know everything about the Griffin family, you're about to discover some mind-blowing secrets that will completely change how you see this animated masterpiece. What I'm about to tell you goes way deeper than just random trivia. We're talking about hidden connections to other shows, real-world controversies that almost destroyed careers, and creative decisions that were so controversial they had to be completely rewritten. Some of these facts are so bizarre that even die-hard fans have never heard them. Let's start with something that will blow your mind. Family Guy didn't just get canceled once, it got canceled twice. But here's where it gets really interesting. The first cancellation happened after just 2 seasons because Fox executives thought the humor was too edgy and the ratings weren't strong enough. Seth MacFarlane was devastated, but he had no idea that this cancellation would actually make the show more popular than it had ever been while it was on the air. Here's what happened during those dark years. Adult Swim picked up the reruns and started airing them late at night. Something magical occurred. The show found its true audience. College students and young adults were staying up late, discovering this irreverent animated comedy that pushed every boundary imaginable. The ratings on Adult Swim were phenomenal. Meanwhile, DVD sales were going through the roof. People weren't just buying the DVDs, they were buying multiple copies to give as gifts. Fox executives started paying attention when they realized they were sitting on a gold mine. The show they had thrown away was generating more buzz and making more money in reruns than most of their current programming. This led to one of the most unprecedented decisions in television history. In 2005, Fox brought Family Guy back from the dead, making it the first canceled primetime series to be revived due to DVD sales and cable reruns. But the resurrection came with a price. Seth MacFarlane had moved on. He was working on other projects and wasn't sure he wanted to return to the world of Peter Griffin. Fox had to offer him an incredibly lucrative deal, including creative control and the promise to produce 2 additional animated series. This is how we eventually got American Dad and The Cleveland Show. Now let's talk about something that will make you see Stewie Griffin in a completely different light. The character was originally designed to be much more evil and sinister. In early episodes, Stewie was genuinely trying to kill Lois and take over the world. But something interesting happened as the show evolved. Seth MacFarlane and the writers began to soften Stewie's character, making him more of a sophisticated intellectual trapped in a baby's body rather than a genuine psychopath. This transformation wasn't accidental. MacFarlane has revealed that Stewie's character development was influenced by his own experiences and observations about childhood intelligence. The writers began to explore the idea that Stewie's apparent evil tendencies were actually the result of a brilliant mind struggling to communicate in a world that couldn't understand him. This is why later episodes show Stewie as more emotionally vulnerable and seeking connection rather than domination. Here's something that might disturb you about the show's research process. The writers of Family Guy have one of the most extensive research teams in television. They don't just make random pop culture references. Every joke, every cutaway, every cultural reference is carefully researched and fact-checked. The team maintains massive databases of information about celebrities, historical events, movies, music, and current events. This is why their parodies are so accurate and cutting. But this attention to detail has gotten them into serious trouble. The show has faced numerous lawsuits from celebrities and public figures who felt they were portrayed unfairly or inaccurately. Some of these legal battles have cost the production millions of dollars. In several cases, entire episodes had to be re-edited or pulled from circulation to avoid further legal complications. One of the most controversial moments in Family Guy history involves a joke that predicted a real tragedy. In a 2013 episode, there was a sequence involving bombs and the Boston Marathon. When the actual Boston Marathon bombing occurred just weeks after the episode aired, conspiracy theorists went crazy. They claimed the show had inside knowledge of the attack. The truth is much simpler but equally disturbing. It was a coincidence, but it highlighted how the show's edgy humor sometimes intersects with real-world events in uncomfortable ways. The production process of Family Guy is unlike any other animated show. While most animated series take months to produce each episode, Family Guy operates on an incredibly tight schedule that requires episodes to be completed in just a few weeks. This is possible because of their unique production pipeline that allows multiple episodes to be in different stages of production simultaneously. Seth MacFarlane's involvement in the show has changed dramatically over the years. While he still provides the voices for multiple characters including Peter, Brian, and Stewie, he's much less involved in the day-to-day writing and production. This transition happened gradually as MacFarlane became more interested in live-action projects and music career. Many fans don't realize that some of their favorite recent episodes were created with minimal input from the show's original creator. The voice acting process reveals some fascinating secrets about the characters. Seth MacFarlane records Peter Griffin's voice by speaking in a lower register than his natural voice, which sometimes causes strain during long recording sessions. For Stewie, he uses a combination of his natural speaking voice with a refined English accent that he developed specifically for the character. Brian's voice is actually closest to MacFarlane's real speaking voice, which is why their conversations often feel the most natural. Here's something that will change how you watch the show forever. Many of the cutaway gags that seem completely random are actually connected to larger storylines that were planned but never fully developed. The writers keep extensive notes about potential character backstories and plot developments. Sometimes these ideas surface as quick cutaway jokes instead of full episodes. This means that seemingly throwaway gags might actually be glimpses into alternative versions of the show that could have existed. The relationship between Family Guy and The Simpsons is much more complex than the surface-level rivalry that fans discuss. Behind the scenes, there's actually a great deal of mutual respect between the creative teams. Several writers and animators have worked on both shows, and there are numerous hidden references and inside jokes that acknowledge this connection. The famous crossover episode took years to develop because both teams wanted to ensure they honored each other's creative legacy. The show's impact on popular culture extends far beyond just entertainment. Family Guy has influenced internet meme culture in ways that are still being discovered. The show's rapid-fire reference style and willingness to break the fourth wall helped establish many of the comedic conventions that now dominate social media and online content. Phrases and concepts from the show have entered everyday language in ways that most people don't even realize. One of the most closely guarded secrets about Family Guy involves the process of celebrity guest appearances. The show has featured hundreds of celebrity voices over the years, but the selection process is incredibly strategic. The producers maintain detailed profiles of celebrities, including their sense of humor, willingness to make fun of themselves, and potential controversy factors. Some major stars have turned down appearances because they weren't comfortable with how they might be portrayed. The animation style of Family Guy appears simple, but it's actually incredibly sophisticated. The character designs are deliberately simplified to allow for rapid production, but the background art and scene composition often contain incredible detail that viewers miss during casual watching. The animators hide visual jokes and references in backgrounds that are only visible when episodes are paused or watched at high definition. The show's relationship with censorship has evolved dramatically over the years. Early episodes pushed boundaries that would be considered tame by today's standards, while recent episodes deal with topics that would have been completely forbidden when the show began. This evolution reflects changing cultural attitudes, but it also shows how the creative team has learned to work within and around broadcasting restrictions. Family Guy's influence on other animated shows is immeasurable. The success of its revival proved that adult animated comedies could be viable long-term properties. This directly led to the creation or continuation of shows like Rick and Morty, Bob's Burgers, and numerous others. The show essentially saved the entire genre of primetime adult animation. The merchandising empire built around Family Guy generates hundreds of millions of dollars annually, but most of this success comes from international markets rather than domestic sales. The show's humor translates surprisingly well across cultural boundaries, making it one of the most globally successful American animated properties ever created. Behind the scenes, the show operates more like a comedy writer's room than a traditional animation studio. The collaborative process involves dozens of writers, animators, and producers working together to create each episode. Ideas can come from anywhere, and the best concepts often emerge from casual conversations rather than formal brainstorming sessions. The legacy of Family Guy extends far beyond entertainment into academic study. Universities now offer courses that analyze the show's cultural impact, comedic techniques, and social commentary. The show has become a legitimate subject of scholarly research in fields ranging from media studies to sociology. As we look toward the future, Family Guy continues to evolve while maintaining the irreverent spirit that made it a cultural phenomenon. The show that once faced cancellation has become an institution, proving that sometimes the most unexpected successes come from taking creative risks and refusing to compromise your vision. Whether you love it or hate it, Family Guy has fundamentally changed television comedy forever. These hidden aspects of its creation and evolution reveal a complex, carefully crafted entertainment machine that continues to surprise and provoke audiences worldwide. The next time you watch an episode, you'll see it through completely different eyes, understanding the incredible journey that brought these characters from cancellation to global cultural dominance. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled twice, and that Seth MacFarlane almost died in the September 11th attacks but missed his flight because of a hangover? And that's just scratching the surface of the absolutely wild behind-the-scenes stories that most people have never heard about this iconic show. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the channel, where we dive deep into the hidden secrets of your favorite shows. Today, we're exploring some absolutely mind-blowing Family Guy lore that even die-hard fans probably don't know about. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at Peter Griffin the same way again. But before we jump into these crazy stories, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because we're constantly dropping content about your favorite animated series that you won't find anywhere else. And if you're a true Family Guy fan, drop a chicken fight emoji in the comments right now. Let's start with something that literally changed the course of television history. Seth MacFarlane was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11, 2001, the same flight that crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. The only reason he wasn't on that plane was because he had been out drinking the night before and overslept, missing his flight by just 15 minutes. MacFarlane has talked about this in interviews, describing how his travel agent called him frantically when she realized what had happened. Can you imagine how different the world of animation would be today if he had made that flight? No Family Guy revival, no American Dad, no The Orville. It's one of those sliding doors moments that completely altered entertainment history. Speaking of near-death experiences, did you know that Family Guy has been canceled not once, but twice? The show originally ran from 1999 to 2002 before Fox pulled the plug due to declining ratings. But here's where it gets interesting. The show found new life through DVD sales and reruns on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim block. The DVD sales were absolutely unprecedented for an animated series at the time. We're talking about millions of copies sold, which was unheard of for a canceled TV show. Adult Swim's late-night reruns were pulling in massive audiences, often outperforming the original Fox broadcasts. The demand became so overwhelming that Fox had no choice but to bring the show back in 2005. But the cancellation drama didn't end there. In 2007, Fox canceled the show again, this time after Season 5. Once again, fan outcry and continued strong performance in syndication forced the network's hand, and they renewed it for a 6th season. It's pretty incredible when you think about it. Family Guy might be the only show in television history to be saved by its fans twice. Now, let's talk about some character secrets that will blow your mind. Stewie Griffin's sexuality has been a topic of debate for years. But Seth MacFarlane actually revealed in interviews that Stewie was originally conceived as a completely straight character who would eventually grow up to be a normal heterosexual adult. The gay undertones that fans picked up on were never intentionally written into the character initially. However, MacFarlane later embraced the ambiguity and has said that Stewie exists in a kind of pre-sexual state where his eventual orientation is deliberately left unclear. This explains why sometimes Stewie seems attracted to women, sometimes to men, and sometimes to neither. It's a fascinating example of how a character can evolve beyond their creator's original intentions. Here's something that might surprise you about Brian Griffin. He was almost killed off permanently way before that infamous Thanksgiving episode where he actually died temporarily. In the early seasons, there were multiple discussions about removing Brian from the show entirely because some writers felt his character was becoming too preachy and unlikable. The writers experimented with making Brian more flawed and hypocritical to balance out his intellectual pretensions, which is why we see him become increasingly alcoholic and self-absorbed as the series progresses. This character development wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate attempt to make him more interesting and less of a mouthpiece for liberal talking points. Let's dive into some voice acting secrets that most people don't know about. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire. Seth, but he also voices dozens of minor characters throughout the series. However, there are some characters he refuses to voice himself. For example, MacFarlane has stated that he deliberately doesn't voice any of the female characters because he believes women should voice female characters whenever possible. This is why actors like Alex Borstein voice Lois and Mila Kunis voices Meg. It's a surprisingly progressive stance for a show that often gets criticized for its treatment of female characters. Speaking of Meg, here's some dark lore about America's least favorite animated teenager. The character was originally supposed to be much more popular and central to the show's dynamic. In early concept art and scripts, Meg was portrayed as a typical popular high school girl who would serve as the voice of reason in the Griffin family. However, the writers quickly discovered that it was much funnier to make her the family scapegoat and punching bag. What started as occasional jokes about Meg being unpopular gradually evolved into the running gag where literally everyone treats her terribly. The writers have admitted that they sometimes feel bad about how mean the show is to Meg, but the jokes are just too funny to stop. Here's a piece of lore that connects to real-world tragedy. The show has made several references to Conway Twitty, the country singer, usually by cutting away to him performing full songs as a way to pad the episode runtime. These cutaway gags became a running joke about lazy writing and time filling. However, there's a darker story behind this. Conway Twitty died in 1993, years before Family Guy even existed. Seth MacFarlane has revealed that the Conway Twitty gags were actually inspired by his own father's love of the singer's music. MacFarlane's father would play Conway Twitty songs constantly when Seth was growing up, and the extended musical cutaways were a way of honoring that memory, while also poking fun at television's tendency to use musical performances as filler. Let's talk about some episodes that almost didn't make it to air. The episode titled Partial Terms of Endearment was actually banned from broadcast television entirely. The episode deals with abortion and surrogate pregnancy in typical Family Guy fashion, but the content was deemed too controversial for Fox's standards. The episode was completely finished and was supposed to air during Season 8, but Fox refused to broadcast it. It was eventually included on the DVD release and made available online, but it remains the only Family Guy episode that has never aired on television in the United States. The controversy surrounding this episode led to stricter content guidelines for the show going forward. Here's something about the show's animation that most people never notice. In the early seasons, the animation style was much more crude and simple, partly due to budget constraints, but also because of the technology available at the time. However, if you watch closely, you'll notice that the animation quality suddenly improves dramatically around Season 4. This wasn't just because of increased budget, it was because the show switched animation studios. The original episodes were animated by a small studio that specialized in low-budget television animation. When the show was revived, Fox invested in higher quality animation produced by a different studio with more advanced technology and techniques. But here's the weird part. Some fans actually prefer the cruder animation style of the early episodes. They argue that the rougher animation gave the show more character and charm. The newer episodes, while technically superior, sometimes feel too polished and corporate compared to the scrappy early seasons. Let's explore some celebrity connections that might surprise you. Patrick Stewart, who voices baby Susie Swanson, actually improvises most of his lines. The writers typically give him a basic outline of what the character needs to say, but Stewart adds his own Shakespearean flair to every line reading. Stewart has said in interviews that voicing a baby character allows him to explore comedy in ways that his serious dramatic roles don't permit. He's also revealed that he often comes up with the most outrageous and inappropriate lines for baby Susie, pushing the boundaries of what the censors will allow. Here's some lore about the show's most controversial episodes. The episode where Brian and Stewie are trapped in a bank vault together for the entire episode was actually written as a bottle episode to save money on animation and voice acting. However, it ended up becoming one of the most critically acclaimed episodes in the show's history. The writers have revealed that they were initially worried the episode would be boring since it only featured 2 characters in one location for the entire runtime. But the episode's success proved that the show worked best when it focused on character development and dialogue rather than just rapid-fire jokes and cutaway gags. Speaking of experimental episodes, did you know that the show has done several episodes that exist in alternate universes or different time periods? These aren't just random creative choices. They're actually part of a larger multiverse concept that the writers have been quietly building throughout the series. The writers have hinted that all of these alternate reality episodes are connected, and that there's a larger mythology about parallel dimensions that runs throughout the show. Most fans don't pick up on these connections because they're subtle and spread across multiple seasons, but dedicated viewers have started mapping out the multiverse timeline. Here's something about the show's music that most people don't realize. Seth MacFarlane is actually a trained singer and musician who has released several albums of standards and jazz music. Many of the musical numbers in Family Guy feature MacFarlane's actual singing voice, not just his character voices. MacFarlane has said that he uses Family Guy as a way to showcase different musical styles and pay homage to classic American songwriting. Some of the show's most elaborate musical sequences were specifically designed to highlight MacFarlane's vocal abilities and his love of traditional pop music. But here's the interesting part. MacFarlane has also revealed that he sometimes writes entire episodes around songs he wants to perform. The plot becomes secondary to the musical numbers, which explains why some episodes feel like they're structured more like variety shows than traditional sitcoms. Let's talk about some behind-the-scenes drama that most fans don't know about. There have been several major conflicts between the voice actors over the years, particularly regarding salary negotiations and creative control. The most significant dispute involved Mila Kunis, who voices Meg. During Season 7, there were reports that Kunis was considering leaving the show due to disagreements about her character's treatment and her compensation compared to other cast members. The situation was eventually resolved, but it led to changes in how Meg was written in subsequent seasons. Here's some dark lore about the show's influence on real-world events. Several episodes of Family Guy have been accused of predicting or inspiring real-world tragedies. The most notable example is an Innuendo episode that aired before the Boston Marathon bombing that featured Peter accidentally detonating bombs in Boston. The episode was pulled from reruns and streaming services after the bombing, and some conspiracy theorists claimed that the show somehow predicted the attack. Seth MacFarlane has addressed these claims, explaining that they're purely coincidental and that the show's writers don't have any special knowledge of future events. However, this incident led to increased scrutiny of the show's content and more careful consideration of how certain jokes and storylines might be interpreted in different contexts. Here's something about the show's international versions that might surprise you. Family Guy has been adapted for television in several different countries, and each version makes significant changes to accommodate local culture and censorship standards. The most interesting adaptation is probably the Arabic version, which removes all alcohol references, changes Brian from a dog to a cat, and significantly tones down the sexual humor. These changes are so extensive that the show becomes almost unrecognizable compared to the American version. As we wrap up this deep dive into Family Guy lore, it's clear that there's so much more to this show than meets the eye. From near-death experiences that changed television history to hidden multiverses and banned episodes, Family Guy has one of the richest and most complex backstories in animated television. These behind-the-scenes stories remind us that even our favorite comedies have real human drama and complexity behind them. The next time you watch Family Guy, you'll hopefully have a new appreciation for all the creative decisions, controversies, and coincidences that shape the show we know today. If you enjoyed learning about these hidden Family Guy secrets, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into your favorite shows. What other animated series would you like us to explore? Next, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video, where we uncover even more secrets from the world of animation. Did you know that Family Guy was actually dead and buried for 3 entire years? And when it came back from the grave, it changed television forever in ways you probably never realized? Stick around, because what I'm about to tell you about the hidden depths of Family Guy will completely change how you see this seemingly simple cartoon. Most people think Family Guy is just random jokes and cutaway gags. But there's a secret layer of storytelling, hidden references, and behind-the-scenes drama that would make your head spin. From secret government conspiracies to real-world tragedies that shaped entire episodes, this show has more dark secrets than you might imagine. Let's start with something that sounds like a conspiracy theory but is absolutely true. Family Guy predicted major world events with scary accuracy. And I'm not talking about lucky guesses. We're talking about specific details that aired months or even years before they actually happened in real life. Remember the episode where Peter accidentally damages a bridge? That episode aired in 2005, showing a bridge collapse in remarkable detail. Less than 2 years later, the Minneapolis bridge collapse happened in almost identical circumstances. Coincidence? Maybe. But wait, there's more. The show also depicted airport security scenarios that became reality after major policy changes. Episodes showing specific security procedures aired before those exact procedures were implemented in real airports. Either Seth MacFarlane is a time traveler, or the writers were paying very close attention to patterns most people missed. But here's where it gets really weird. The show once depicted a very specific type of terrorist attack involving planes, and this aired before certain real-world events that I can't get too detailed about without this video getting demonetized. The point is, Family Guy wasn't just making random jokes about current events. They were somehow tapping into the collective unconscious of what was coming next. Now let's talk about the show's death and resurrection, because this story is wilder than any episode plot. Family Guy was canceled in 2002 after just 3 seasons. Fox executives thought it was done forever, but here's what they didn't expect. The DVD sales went absolutely insane. People were buying Family Guy DVDs like crazy, and more importantly, Adult Swim started running reruns that pulled in massive ratings. Fox realized they had made a huge mistake. The show wasn't just popular. It was building a cult following that was growing stronger every day it was off the air. When Family Guy came back in 2005, something had fundamentally changed. The writers knew they had been given a second chance, and they went absolutely wild with it. The humor got darker, the references got more obscure, and they started breaking the fourth wall in ways that no animated show had ever done before. But here's the part that most fans don't know. The cancellation and resurrection created a split personality within the show itself. There's pre-cancellation Family Guy and post-cancellation Family Guy, and they're almost like 2 different shows entirely. Pre-cancellation Family Guy was more grounded. Sure, it was weird, but the characters felt like real people with real problems. Post-cancellation Family Guy became something else entirely. It became a commentary on television itself. A show that was constantly aware it was a show. This shift created what television historians now call the meta-revolution. Family Guy showed other animated shows that you could break every rule, reference your own existence, and make fun of the very network that pays you and still be successful. South Park, Rick and Morty, and countless other shows followed this blueprint. Speaking of breaking rules, let's talk about the episodes that almost didn't make it to air. There's a whole vault of Family Guy content that was deemed too controversial, too dark, or too legally problematic to broadcast. Some of these episodes have become legendary among fans who have never seen them. One infamous episode dealt with a real-world tragedy in such a specific way that it would have caused massive backlash. The episode was fully animated, voiced, and scored, but it was pulled at the last minute. Only a handful of people have ever seen it, and they're bound by non-disclosure agreements. Another banned episode featured a storyline that involved real political figures in scenarios that would have caused international incidents. The legal department shut it down so hard that even mentioning specific details could result in lawsuits. But here's what's fascinating about these banned episodes. They showed just how far Seth MacFarlane and his team were willing to push boundaries. They weren't just making a cartoon. They were conducting social experiments to see what society would tolerate. This brings us to one of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy lore: the show's relationship with censorship and standards. Every episode that makes it to air represents hundreds of battles fought behind the scenes between the writers and network executives. The writers developed an elaborate system for getting controversial content past the censors. They would intentionally include material they knew would be rejected, so that when they fought to keep the stuff they really wanted, it would seem reasonable by comparison. It's psychological warfare disguised as comedy writing. This strategy works so well that other shows started copying it. The Family Guy approach to dealing with censorship became the industry standard for pushing boundaries on television. Now let's dive into the character origins, because the backstories of these characters are way darker and more complex than you'd expect from a comedy show. Peter Griffin wasn't always the lovable idiot we know today. In early concept art and scripts, he was genuinely disturbing, almost psychopathic in his behavior. The writers had to gradually soften Peter's character because test audiences found him genuinely unlikable. But traces of that original darker Peter still show up in certain episodes, creating this weird cognitive dissonance where you're laughing at someone who, if you really think about it, should probably be in prison. Stewie's character evolution is even more interesting. He was originally conceived as a pure villain, a baby bent on world domination with no redeeming qualities. But as the show progressed, the writers started exploring what would make a baby want to destroy everything, and they discovered something profound about childhood trauma and family dynamics. The gradual softening of Stewie from villain to complex character represents one of the most sophisticated character development arcs in television comedy. But it happened so slowly that most viewers didn't even notice it was happening. Brian's character might be the most tragic of all. He represents the writer's own struggles with depression, alcoholism, and the feeling of being trapped in a life that doesn't match your dreams. Every time Brian has an existential crisis, it's the writers working through their own psychological issues on screen. This is why Brian's temporary death hit fans so hard. It wasn't just killing off a character, it was the writers symbolically killing off the part of themselves that they saw in Brian. When they brought him back, it represented their own decision to keep fighting through depression and creative frustration. The show's relationship with its own success is another layer of complexity that most fans miss. Family Guy became so popular that it started influencing real-world culture, but this success created a feedback loop that began changing the show itself. References to Family Guy started showing up in other TV shows, movies, and even news broadcasts. Politicians started making Family Guy references in speeches. The show went from commenting on culture to actually shaping culture, and this shift is reflected in the later seasons. The writers became increasingly aware that they were creating cultural touchstones, and this awareness changed how they approached comedy. Jokes that might have been throwaway gags in early seasons became carefully crafted cultural commentary in later seasons. This evolution created what media scholars call the recursive effect, where a piece of media becomes so influential that it starts commenting on its own influence. Family Guy didn't just break the fourth wall, it demolished the entire theater. Let's talk about the real-world consequences of Family Guy's cultural impact. The show has been credited with changing how people communicate, particularly in how they use pop culture references in everyday conversation. Before Family Guy, pop culture references in conversation were usually recent and obvious. After Family Guy, people started making increasingly obscure references, creating entire conversations that were essentially elaborate chains of cultural callbacks. This changed how humor works in social situations. The show also influenced how other media uses cutaway gags and non sequiturs. Everything from commercials to political campaigns started using Family Guy-style random humor to grab attention and create memorable moments. But perhaps the most significant impact was on censorship standards across all media. Family Guy pushed boundaries so consistently and successfully that it expanded what was considered acceptable on television. Shows that came after could go places that wouldn't have been possible before Family Guy paved the way. The voice acting in Family Guy deserves its own deep dive because there are layers of performance art happening that most people completely miss. Seth MacFarlane doesn't just voice multiple characters. He creates distinct psychological profiles for each voice that reflect different aspects of his own personality. Peter represents 10. MacFarlane's id, his impulse-driven, consequence-ignoring side. Brian represents his superego, his intellectual, morally concerned side. Stewie represents his ego, his ambitious, attention-seeking side. The show is essentially one person having a conversation with different aspects of himself. This psychological complexity extends to the guest voices as well. When celebrities appear on Family Guy, they're not just doing celebrity cameos. They're being integrated into this complex psychological ecosystem that MacFarlane has created. The show's approach to celebrity culture is particularly sophisticated. Rather than just making fun of celebrities, Family Guy examines the psychological impact of fame on both celebrities and the people who consume celebrity culture. This brings us to one of the most overlooked aspects of Family Guy, its commentary on media consumption itself. The show constantly references other TV shows, movies, and cultural phenomena, but it's not just making references for the sake of references. Each reference serves as a commentary on how media shapes our understanding of reality. When Peter acts out scenes from movies, he's demonstrating how deeply fictional narratives penetrate real human behavior. When the show parodies other TV shows, it's examining how different formats and styles influence how we process information. The cutaway gags aren't random interruptions. They're demonstrations of how the human mind actually works. We don't think in linear narratives. We think in associations, tangents, and random connections. Family Guy mirrors the actual structure of human consciousness. This psychological accuracy is why the show resonates so deeply with audiences. It's not just funny, it's cognitively familiar. The chaos of Family Guy matches the chaos of our own internal mental experience. The show's treatment of social issues is another area where there's more depth than meets the eye. While Family Guy often appears to make jokes at the expense of sensitive topics, careful analysis reveals a more complex approach to social commentary. The show uses humor to make serious points more palatable, but it also uses humor to expose the absurdity of certain social attitudes. When characters make prejudiced statements, they're usually portrayed as idiotic or ignorant, effectively undermining the attitudes they're expressing. This technique allows the show to address controversial topics without preaching, but it also creates ambiguity about what the show actually believes. This ambiguity is intentional, forcing viewers to think critically about the issues being presented rather than passively accepting predetermined conclusions. As we wrap up this exploration of Family Guy's hidden depths, it's worth considering what this all means for the future of comedy in television. Family Guy didn't just entertain audiences. It fundamentally changed what television could be and do. The show proved that audiences were hungry for more complex, self-aware entertainment that challenged traditional narrative structures. It demonstrated that comedy could be a vehicle for serious psychological and social exploration without losing its entertainment value. Most importantly, Family Guy showed that taking creative risks, even when they result in cancellation, can ultimately lead to greater success than playing it safe. The show's death and resurrection became a template for how creative properties can find new life through changing audience behaviors and consumption patterns. So the next time you watch Family Guy, remember that you're not just watching a cartoon about a dysfunctional family. You're watching a sophisticated piece of media art that changed television forever, influenced how we communicate with each other, and continues to push boundaries in ways that most viewers never fully appreciate. The real genius of Family Guy isn't in any single joke or episode. It's in how it managed to hide all this complexity behind what appears to be simple, silly humor. That's the ultimate magic trick, and it's still working after all these years. Have you ever wondered about the fascinating dynamics that shape families throughout history? Tonight, as you settle into your bedtime routine, let me share some captivating insights about how family patterns repeat across generations, creating an intricate web of inherited traits, behaviors, and destinies that might just help you drift off into peaceful slumber. Family structures have always been complex tapestries, woven with threads of genetics, environment, and circumstance. Consider how certain characteristics seem to flow like rivers through family lines, creating patterns that emerge generation after generation. These inherited traits aren't just physical features, like eye color or height, but can include personality quirks, talents, and even behavioral tendencies that create a unique family signature. The concept of generational influence runs deeper than most people realize. When we examine family trees, we often discover that certain professions, interests, or life choices appear repeatedly across different generations. A family might produce multiple musicians, teachers, or entrepreneurs, not just through conscious choice, but through a combination of genetic predisposition, shared values, and environmental factors that create natural pathways for similar expressions of human potential. Birth order plays a fascinating role in shaping family dynamics. Firstborn children often develop leadership qualities and feel responsibility for their younger siblings, while middle children frequently become skilled negotiators and peacekeepers. The youngest children in families tend to be more creative and risk-taking, having learned to find unique ways to capture attention and carve out their own identity within the family structure. Family traditions serve as invisible threads that bind generations together across time. These rituals, whether simple bedtime stories, holiday celebrations, or annual camping trips, create shared memories that become part of the family's collective identity. Even seemingly minor traditions like Sunday morning pancakes or evening walks can have profound psychological impacts, providing stability and continuity that children carry forward into their own families. The role of family nicknames reveals interesting patterns about relationships and hierarchies within family units. Often, these pet names originate from childhood moments or personality traits, but they can persist for decades, sometimes becoming more commonly used than actual given names. These linguistic markers create intimate bonds, while also establishing informal family roles and expectations. Consider the phenomenon of family talents that seem to skip generations. A grandparent's artistic ability might lay dormant in their children, only to resurface dramatically in grandchildren who never received formal training but somehow possess intuitive skills. This genetic memory suggests that our family heritage carries forward capabilities that can emerge unexpectedly, creating surprising connections across time. Family communication patterns often mirror broader cultural values and historical contexts. Some families maintain formal, hierarchical communication styles passed down from previous generations, while others adopt more casual, egalitarian approaches. These patterns influence how family members express emotions, resolve conflicts, and show affection, creating distinct family cultures that can persist for generations. The geographic movements of families create interesting stories of adaptation and change. When families migrate, whether across countries or just to different neighborhoods, they face decisions about which traditions to maintain and which to modify. This process of cultural negotiation often reveals the most essential elements of family identity, as members unconsciously choose which practices are too important to abandon. Family financial attitudes demonstrate remarkable consistency across generations. Families that experienced economic hardship often pass down frugal spending habits and strong work ethics, while families with consistent prosperity might emphasize different values around money and success. These economic philosophies become embedded in family culture, influencing career choices and life priorities for decades. The evolution of family roles over time reflects broader social changes while maintaining certain consistent patterns. Traditional gender roles within families have shifted significantly, yet many families still maintain informal divisions of labor and responsibility that echo historical patterns. Understanding these shifts helps us appreciate how families serve as bridges between past and present social norms. Family conflict resolution styles often become inherited patterns that influence how future generations handle disagreements. Some families emphasize direct confrontation and heated discussion, believing that airing grievances leads to stronger relationships. Others prioritize harmony and indirect communication, viewing conflict as something to be minimized rather than engaged. These approaches shape children's expectations about relationships throughout their lives. The role of family storytelling in preserving history cannot be overstated. Every family has its collection of stories about ancestors, significant events, and character-defining moments. These narratives serve multiple purposes. They preserve important information, reinforce family values, and create a sense of belonging to something larger than individual experience. The way these stories are told and retold shapes family identity. Family eating habits and food traditions reveal deep cultural connections and emotional bonds. Certain recipes become treasured family heirlooms, passed down with specific techniques and accompanying stories. The social dynamics around family meals, from formal dining protocols to casual kitchen conversations, establish patterns of gathering and sharing that influence social skills and relationship expectations. Educational values within families create powerful legacies that influence multiple generations. Some families prioritize formal academic achievement, creating environments where intellectual curiosity and scholarly success are highly valued. Others emphasize practical skills and hands-on learning, believing that real-world experience provides the best education. These educational philosophies shape career paths and life choices across generations. Family attitudes toward risk and adventure demonstrate interesting patterns of inheritance and rebellion. Conservative families might produce generations of careful planners and cautious decision-makers, while more adventurous families encourage risk-taking and exploration. Sometimes these patterns reverse, with risk-averse parents producing adventurous children as a form of generational rebellion or balance. The concept of family loyalty manifests in various ways across different family structures. Some families maintain strong expectations of mutual support and collective decision-making, while others prioritize individual autonomy and self-reliance. These loyalty patterns influence everything from career choices to marriage decisions, as family members navigate between personal desires and family expectations. Family creative expressions often create unexpected connections across generations. A love of music, visual arts, writing, or craftsmanship can emerge in various family members, sometimes connecting distant relatives who share artistic sensibilities. These creative threads create special bonds and often become sources of family pride and identity. The role of family pets in shaping household dynamics deserves special attention. Animals often become integral family members, teaching children about responsibility, empathy, and loss. The way families choose, care for, and remember their pets reveals important values about nurturing, commitment, and the circle of life. Family travel patterns and attitudes toward exploration influence worldview development across generations. Some families prioritize exposure to different cultures and experiences, believing that travel broadens perspective and builds character. Others focus on deep connections to local communities and familiar environments, emphasizing the importance of roots and stability. The management of family secrets and sensitive information creates complex dynamics that can influence relationships for generations. How families handle difficult topics like addiction, mental health issues, financial problems, or relationship conflicts establishes patterns of openness or secrecy that affect trust and communication across multiple generations. Family celebration styles reflect deeper values about community, tradition, and joy. Some families create elaborate celebrations for birthdays, holidays, and achievements, believing that marking special occasions strengthens bonds and creates positive memories. Others prefer quiet, intimate acknowledgments, focusing on personal meaning rather than external display. The role of extended family members like grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins in providing alternative perspectives and relationships cannot be overlooked. These connections often provide children with different models of adult behavior and alternative sources of support, enriching the family experience and providing backup systems during difficult times. Family decision-making processes reveal important patterns about authority, consensus building, and individual voice within family structures. Some families operate as democracies, where everyone's opinion carries weight, while others maintain hierarchical structures where certain members hold more influence. These patterns shape children's expectations about leadership and participation in other social contexts. The preservation and sharing of family photographs and mementos creates tangible connections to family history. The way families organize, display, and discuss these artifacts influences how younger generations understand their heritage and place within the family narrative. Digital technology has transformed these practices while maintaining their essential emotional functions. Family approaches to health and wellness often establish lifelong patterns that influence physical and mental well-being. Some families prioritize active lifestyles and preventive care, while others may have more reactive approaches to health issues. These attitudes toward physical maintenance and medical care create lasting influences on individual health choices. The way families handle transitions and major life changes reveals resilience patterns that can be passed down through generations. Some families thrive during periods of change, viewing challenges as opportunities for growth and adaptation. Others prefer stability and may struggle more with transitions, requiring additional support during periods of adjustment. Family gift-giving traditions and attitudes toward material possessions reflect deeper values about generosity, reciprocity, and the relationship between objects and emotions. Some families emphasize thoughtful, personalized gifts that demonstrate attention and care, while others focus on practical items or experiences rather than material objects. As we consider these intricate patterns that weave through family histories, we begin to understand that every family represents a unique experiment in human connection and development. The combinations of genetics, environment, choice, and circumstance create endless variations in how families function and evolve across time. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, perhaps reflect on the fascinating tapestry of your own family story. Consider the threads that connect you to previous generations and the new patterns you might be creating for future ones. Family dynamics continue to pattern strang up to one's own. Evolve, influenced by changing social norms, technological advances, and individual choices. Yet certain fundamental human needs for connection, belonging, and identity remain constant across all family structures. These complex family systems remind us that we are all part of something larger than ourselves, connected to both past and future through invisible bonds of shared experience, inherited traits, and chosen relationships. Understanding these patterns can help us appreciate the remarkable diversity of human family experience, while recognizing the common threads that unite all families in their fundamental mission of nurturing, protecting, and preparing the next generation for their own journey through life. Sweet dreams, and may your rest be filled with peaceful reflections on the beautiful complexity of family bonds that connect us all across time and space. Have you ever wondered what happens when your favorite animated characters don't just get blown up for laughs, but actually stay dead? Well, grab a cup of warm milk and get comfortable, because tonight we're diving deep into the surprisingly dark world of Family Guy's permanently deceased characters. And trust me, some of these deaths will shock you more than Peter's latest workplace accident. Now, before we start counting bodies, let's be real about something. Family Guy isn't exactly known for its restraint when it comes to cartoon violence. Characters get flattened, exploded, and dismembered on a weekly basis only to magically appear in the next scene like nothing happened. But every once in a while, the Grim Reaper actually keeps his receipts, and these characters never bounce back. Some were killed because fans couldn't stand them, others because their voice actors passed away in real life, and a few just got caught in the crossfire of Seth MacFarlane's twisted sense of humor. So dim those lights, settle into your most comfortable position, and let's explore every character that Family Guy has permanently sent to the great cartoon afterlife. Starting with the very first casualty that taught us this show wasn't messing around when it came to consequences. Our journey begins with Mr. Weed, Peter's original boss at the happy-go-lucky toy factory. This man first graced our screens way back in the pilot episode, catching Peter dead drunk at his workstation because apparently showing up sober was too much to ask. Mr. Weed was everything you'd expect from a factory supervisor dealing with Peter Griffin as an employee. Stern, professional, and probably questioning every career choice that led him to that moment. What made Mr. Weed fascinating wasn't just his no-nonsense attitude, but the running joke about his suspiciously theatrical mannerisms. The show never explicitly confirmed anything about his personal life, but his fabulous gestures and dramatic flair became a subtle recurring gag. Despite Peter's constant screw-ups, Mr. Weed kept giving him second chances, firing and rehiring him like it was some kind of workplace hobby. The irony is that this unusual loyalty to Peter ultimately sealed his fate. In the episode where everything went wrong, Peter decided to invite his boss over for dinner to make a good impression. Surprisingly, the evening started perfectly. Mr. Weed was genuinely impressed by Peter's home, family, and even Brian's ability to speak. He was so impressed that he offered Peter a promotion to head of toy development. That's when dinner took a deadly turn. Brian, shocked by this unexpected good news, started choking on a dinner roll. When Peter and Lois performed the Heimlich maneuver, the roll shot out of Brian's mouth like a projectile and landed directly in Mr. Weed's throat. And unlike the countless other times characters have faced mortal peril in this show, Mr. Weed actually died from choking. The funeral scene was classic Family Guy darkness. Mr. Weed left behind a videotaped will announcing that the happy-go-lucky toy factory would be demolished to make way for something called the homoerotic toy factory. It was absurd, tragic, and weirdly fitting for a character whose sexuality had been a running gag throughout his appearances. Moving from workplace fatalities to relationship drama, let's talk about Loretta Brown, Cleveland's ex-wife, who met her end in a way that perfectly summarized her entire character arc. Loretta was everything Cleveland wasn't. Where he was calm and soft-spoken, she was loud, demanding, and took no prisoners when it came to getting what she wanted. Their marriage started cracking when Quagmire's infamous inability to control himself led to an affair. During a fishing trip, a fish accidentally landed on Loretta's chest, and she took it as some kind of cosmic sign to sleep with the guy who caught it. Classic Family Guy logic, really. When Peter and Brian discovered this affair, they recognized Quagmire by his distinctive tattoo, leading to the most awkward revelation scene in television history. Cleveland's reaction to learning about the betrayal was so pathetically calm that it almost hurt to watch. Instead of rage or dramatic confrontation, he just apologized and accepted being kicked out of his own home. It wasn't until Peter and Lois called him out for being too passive that Cleveland finally found his spine and went after Quagmire. After their divorce was finalized, Loretta lived alone in a house on the hill, which sounds poetic until you remember this is Family Guy, and nothing stays peaceful for long. Her death came during one of Peter's elaborate pranks that somehow always managed to destroy Cleveland's property. This time, instead of Cleveland surviving the chaos like usual, Loretta got caught in the destruction and was crushed by falling debris. The reason behind Loretta's permanent exit was actually practical rather than narrative. Her voice actress, Alex Borstein, who also voices Lois, found Loretta's gravelly voice too difficult and painful to perform. Rather than recast the character, the writers decided to kill her off permanently, which honestly feels like the most Family Guy solution possible. Speaking of deaths that came out of nowhere, Horace's demise was particularly heartbreaking for fans of the Drunken Clam. This guy had been serving drinks to Peter, Quagmire, Joe, and Cleveland since the early seasons, surviving multiple near-death experiences that should have killed any normal bartender. He'd been shot, knocked unconscious, and even survived a fire, leading viewers to believe he was practically immortal. His luck finally ran out during a softball game between the Drunken Clam and Goldman's Pharmacy. Jerome, brought in as a ringer for Mort's team, was at bat when Horace tried to strike him out. Instead of a strikeout, Horace got struck down permanently. The episode revealed his death so casually that it almost felt cruel. But that's exactly the kind of dark humor Family Guy specializes in. The aftermath was even more devastating. The Drunken Clam was set to close permanently, which would have destroyed one of the show's most important locations. Peter tried everything to save the bar, but it was Jerome himself, the man who accidentally killed Horace, who stepped up to buy the establishment and keep it running. It was a surprisingly touching resolution to a tragic situation. Now let's talk about Peter's father, or at least the man he thought was his father for most of his life. Francis Griffin was the embodiment of strict Irish Catholic values, taken to an uncomfortable extreme. His dislike of Lois simply because she was Protestant created constant family tension, and his general disappointment in Peter was palpable in every scene they shared. When Francis retired and moved in with the Griffin family, he transformed their home into what looked like a Catholic gift shop explosion. Crucifixes appeared in every room. Religious imagery covered the walls, and the atmosphere became so oppressive that Peter actually convinced the Pope to visit and talk some sense into his father. The fact that Francis accused the Pope of going soft tells you everything you need to know about his personality. Francis met his end during Meg's birthday party, which was already going poorly because Peter was, as usual, being a complete embarrassment. While attempting one of his signature stupid stunts, Peter accidentally caused an accident that put Francis in the hospital. On his deathbed, Francis had some final words for his son that were both cruel and oddly accurate. He called Peter a fat, stinking drunk, which honestly wasn't wrong, but the timing made it particularly harsh. The revelation that Francis wasn't even Peter's biological father came during therapy sessions afterward. Peter discovered his real father was an Irishman named Mickey McFinnigan, who only accepted Peter after he proved himself in a drinking contest. It was a twisted validation of everything Francis had criticized about Peter's character. Peter's mother, Thelma Griffin, also received the permanent death treatment, though her passing was handled with less dramatic flair. She died of a stroke at the beginning of an episode that quickly shifted focus to Peter getting involved with an older woman, which was weird timing even by Family Guy standards. Thelma had always been a complex character, technically nicer than Francis, but carrying her own set of serious problems. She was a smoker, gambler, and alcoholic who had created several traumatic childhood memories for Peter through her neglectful and sometimes abusive behavior. Her habit of dropping bombshells on Peter whenever she visited made every appearance feel like an emotional landmine. The most shocking revelation came when Peter needed his birth certificate and discovered he wasn't born in America but in Mexico. Thelma had gone there to terminate her pregnancy after learning Peter's real father was an Irish drunk, but changed her mind after giving birth and smuggled baby Peter back to the United States. She then married Francis to give Peter a father figure, creating the lie that lasted Peter's entire childhood. Moving into the realm of characters that almost nobody mourned, Doug's death was announced so casually that it felt like an afterthought. This preschool rival of Stewie's had been a thorn in the baby's side for multiple episodes, representing everything Stewie hated about other children his age. Their rivalry started over playground politics and escalated into full-scale warfare, complete with campaign strategies and political maneuvering when Doug ran unopposed for snack captain. Stewie's terror at the thought of Doug gaining any kind of political experience, even at the preschool level, led to some of the show's most absurd storylines involving toddler espionage and election fraud. The episode ended with Stewie wearing the snack captain hat and casually mentioning that Doug had died in a commuter plane crash that morning. The matter-of-fact delivery and complete lack of emotional response from anyone made it clear that Doug's death was meant to be darkly comedic rather than tragic. Fans were actually relieved to see the annoying character permanently removed from the show. Bertram's death was far more dramatic and tied into one of Family Guy's most science fiction-heavy storylines. As Stewie's artificially conceived half-brother, Bertram represented a legitimate threat to Stewie's intellectual supremacy and served as his most formidable opponent throughout multiple episodes. Their first encounter inside Peter's reproductive system established them as equals in terms of intelligence and ruthlessness. After forming a temporary alliance based on their mutual hatred of Lois, the two babies eventually turned on each other in a conflict that escalated beyond playground politics into actual warfare involving time travel and assassination attempts. Bertram's master plan involved traveling back in time to eliminate one of Stewie's ancestors, Leonardo da Vinci, thereby erasing Stewie from existence entirely. The fact that he actually succeeded in killing da Vinci showed just how dangerous and competent Bertram could be when properly motivated. However, Stewie proved to be the superior strategist by tracking Bertram down through time and ending their rivalry permanently. The execution scene, where Stewie asks Bertram about his favorite bottled water before killing him, demonstrated the cold calculation that made Stewie such a compelling character. Unlike Doug's casual disposal, Bertram's death felt earned through multiple episodes of build-up and character development. The double murder episode stands out as one of Family Guy's most ambitious attempts at sustained storytelling across a full episode length. The mystery dinner party format allowed the writers to eliminate multiple characters while providing entertainment value through the whodunit structure. Muriel Goldman's death during this episode felt particularly cruel because she had never been anything more than a background character who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. As Mort's wife, she was essentially a female version of his neurotic personality, which made their relationship believable but didn't give her much individual characterization. The revelation that she had been exchanging mysterious messages with James Woods created false suspense about her potential involvement in the murders, but she was ultimately just another victim caught up in someone else's revenge scheme. Her funeral scene showed how little impact she had made on the community, with even her husband and son seeming relatively unaffected by her death. Diane Simmons represented the episode's true villain and most shocking revelation. As Tom Tucker's longtime co-anchor, she had been a background presence for years without showing any signs of homicidal tendencies. Her transformation from professional newswoman to calculating murderer demonstrated how deeply personal rejections and professional disappointments could push someone over the edge. The motive behind her killing spree was painfully relatable in its pettiness. Being dumped by James Woods for a younger woman and facing replacement by a younger co-anchor as she turned 40 created the perfect storm of humiliation and desperation. Her methodical approach to framing Tom Tucker for the murders showed intelligence and planning that made her genuinely dangerous. Diane's final confrontation with Lois provided the classic villain monologue moment where all her motivations were revealed. The irony of being killed by Stewie, a baby, after successfully eliminating multiple adult targets added the kind of dark humor that Family Guy specialized in creating. Patty Tanager's death was perhaps the most satisfying for viewers who had endured his annoying catchphrase and constant attempts to start fights over nothing. This short, aggressive man represented everything irritating about people who create drama where none needs to exist. His role as the boss of a car dealership where Brian worked temporarily showed that his obnoxious personality wasn't limited to casual encounters. Even in professional settings, he couldn't resist making inappropriate comments and stirring up unnecessary conflict with his employees and customers. The poetic justice of his death came when he tried to start a fight with someone operating a military tank. His final words, maintaining his catchphrase even while facing certain doom, showed that he was committed to his obnoxious personality right until the end. The audience's reaction to his death was overwhelmingly positive, proving that sometimes characters are specifically designed to be eliminated. The deaths of Angela and Mayor Adam West carried more emotional weight because they were tied to the real-life passing of their voice actors. These weren't creative decisions made for storyline purposes, but necessary responses to losing the talented people who brought these characters to life. Angela's character arc, from hostile supervisor to lonely woman seeking connection, provided some of Peter's most uncomfortable workplace storylines. Her sexual harassment of Peter while threatening his job security created situations that were both comedically awkward and genuinely problematic by today's standards. Her backstory, revealing years of loneliness and isolation, made her desperate actions more understandable without excusing them. The resolution where Peter dresses up to take her on a fake date showed his capacity for kindness even when dealing with someone who had made his life difficult. Carrie Fisher's death in real life meant that Angela's character had to be written out permanently. The funeral scene in her honor served as both a farewell to the character and a tribute to the actress who had voiced her. Peter's mistake of ending up at the wrong funeral added typical Family Guy humor to what was otherwise a genuinely touching moment. Mayor Adam West's death marked the end of one of the show's most beloved recurring characters. His wonderfully insane personality and possibly corrupt political practices had provided countless moments of absurd humor throughout his long tenure as Quahog's mayor. The real Adam West's connection to his animated counterpart made the character feel more authentic and grounded despite his completely unrealistic behavior and dialogue. His brief challenge from Lois during her political phase showed that even incompetent leadership was preferable to the corruption that inevitably followed. His marriage to Carol Pewterschmidt, Lois's sister, created additional family connections that made his death more personally impactful for the main characters. The tribute episode where Brian petitioned to rename the high school after Mayor West provided proper closure for a character who had been part of the show's fabric for over 16 seasons. The ghost appearance at the end where Mayor West saves Brian from falling off a cliff gave the character one final moment of heroism and showed that death couldn't completely remove him from the Family Guy universe. His replacement by Wild West as mayor acknowledged that the character was irreplaceable while allowing the show to continue. These permanent deaths in Family Guy serve multiple purposes beyond simple shock value. They demonstrate that actions can have genuine consequences, even in a cartoon universe known for its resurrection-running gags. Some characters were eliminated because they had served their narrative purpose, others because fan reaction made their continued presence counterproductive, and some because real-world circumstances forced the writers' hands. The variety in how these deaths were handled shows the range of Family Guy's storytelling capabilities. From casual mentions that treat death as an afterthought to elaborate murder mystery episodes that build tension across an entire episode, the show has found multiple ways to permanently remove characters while maintaining its signature dark humor. The emotional impact of these deaths varies significantly based on character development and audience attachment. Long-running characters like Mayor West and Horace created genuine sadness among fans, while annoying characters like Doug and Patty Tanager were celebrated in their passing. This range of reactions demonstrates how effectively the show had developed distinct personalities for even its minor recurring characters. What makes these permanent deaths particularly interesting is how they contrast with Family Guy's usual approach to cartoon violence. The show regularly features deaths that are immediately reversed or ignored, making the permanent ones stand out as genuinely significant events. When a character stays dead in this universe, it carries extra weight, because viewers know it's not the norm. The practical reasons behind some of these deaths, such as voice actor availability or fan reaction, show how external factors can influence creative decisions in long-running animated series. The writers have generally handled these necessary eliminations with appropriate respect while maintaining the show's comedic tone. Looking back at this collection of permanently deceased characters reveals the evolution of Family Guy's storytelling over its many seasons. Earlier deaths, like Mr. Weed, were often accidental consequences of the show's chaotic humor, while later deaths, like those in the murder mystery episode, showed more deliberate narrative planning. The show's willingness to permanently eliminate characters demonstrates confidence in its ability to create new sources of humor and conflict without relying on the same recurring personalities indefinitely. This creative flexibility has helped Family Guy maintain freshness across its extended run, while still honoring the contributions of departed characters. These deaths also serve as reminders that even in the most outrageous fictional universes, some actions cannot be undone. They provide moments of genuine consequence in a show that otherwise operates on cartoon logic, where nothing permanent ever happens to the main characters. So there you have it, fellow insomniacs and Family Guy enthusiasts. A complete tour through the surprisingly extensive graveyard of characters who didn't make it back from their final Family Guy appearances. From workplace accidents to murder mysteries, from natural causes to tank-related incidents, the show has found creative ways to permanently remove characters while maintaining its signature blend of dark humor and unexpected heart. Sweet dreams, and remember, in the world of Family Guy, even cartoon death can sometimes be permanent. Have you ever wondered what makes Family Guy the perfect show to fall asleep to? Tonight, we're diving deep into the wonderfully weird world of Quahog to uncover some fascinating facts that might just help you understand why millions of people drift off to this animated chaos every single night. But first, let me ask you something. What if I told you that the baby genius who plots world domination actually has one of the most tragic character arcs in television history? Or that there's a scientific reason why Peter Griffin's voice might be the ultimate sleep aid? Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll never look at your bedtime Family Guy marathon the same way again. Let's start with something that'll blow your mind. Stewie Griffin, that diabolical infant with the posh British accent, wasn't always the character we know today. In the original concept, he was supposed to be much darker and more sinister. The show's creator, Seth MacFarlane, initially envisioned him as a genuinely evil character whose plans would occasionally succeed. But here's the fascinating part that most fans don't realize. Stewie's entire personality is built on a foundation of insecurity and loneliness that makes him oddly relatable, especially during those late-night viewing sessions when you're feeling a bit isolated yourself. The genius baby's accent tells us everything we need to know about human psychology. In one of the show's most revealing moments, Stewie admits in therapy that his British accent is completely fake. He adopted it to sound smarter and more sophisticated than everyone around him. It's essentially vocal armor designed to protect his vulnerable core. This resonates with so many viewers because we all put on masks to hide our insecurities. When you're lying in bed at 3 a.m, there's something comforting about a character who's also struggling with authenticity. But here's where it gets really interesting. The show deliberately keeps it ambiguous whether other characters can actually understand Stewie. Sometimes they respond to him. Sometimes they completely ignore his elaborate monologues about world domination. This creates a dreamlike quality that perfectly mirrors the state between waking and sleeping. Your brain doesn't have to work too hard to follow rigid logic because the show itself operates on dream logic. Speaking of dream logic, let's talk about the show's relationship with time and reality. Family Guy is famous for its cutaway gags that transport viewers to completely different scenarios mid-episode. One moment Peter is arguing with Lois about dinner. The next moment we're watching a historical flashback about Napoleon's bathroom habits. These rapid shifts in context actually mimic the way our minds work when we're falling asleep, jumping from thought to thought without linear connection. The show's approach to continuity is another sleep-inducing factor. Characters die and come back to life, major events get completely forgotten by the next episode, and the family somehow never ages despite running for over 2 decades. This lack of consequences creates a safe space for your mind. You don't need to worry about emotional investment or following complex storylines. It's mental comfort food. Now let's examine the voice acting, because this is where the science gets really interesting. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple main characters, including Peter, Brian, and Stewie. The consistency of hearing the same vocal patterns creates a subconscious sense of familiarity and safety. Peter's voice in particular has a rhythmic, almost hypnotic quality that many sleep specialists would recognize as naturally soothing. The slight nasal tone and steady pacing can actually help regulate breathing patterns. Brian Griffin represents something unique in the Family Guy universe. As the talking dog who serves as the show's voice of reason, he often delivers philosophical observations and cultural commentary. But here's what makes him perfect for sleep viewing. His conversations with Stewie frequently dive into existential topics without becoming too heavy or anxiety-provoking. They discuss the meaning of life, mortality, and purpose in ways that feel profound but never overwhelming. It's like having a gentle philosophical discussion as you drift off to sleep. The show's approach to controversial topics is surprisingly sophisticated when you analyze it from a sleep psychology perspective. While Family Guy is known for pushing boundaries, it does so in such an over-the-top way that it becomes almost cartoonish rather than genuinely disturbing. This allows viewers to process difficult subjects without the emotional intensity that would keep them awake. It's social commentary wrapped in enough absurdity to feel safe. Let's dive into the Griffin family dynamics, because they reveal something fascinating about comfort viewing. Despite all their dysfunction, the family always comes back together by the end of each episode. Peter might do something incredibly stupid. Lois might lose her temper. Meg might face another humiliation, but they remain a unit. This predictable structure provides emotional security. No matter how chaotic things get, you know everything will essentially reset by the next episode. The show's treatment of Meg Griffin deserves special attention. As the perpetually misunderstood teenager who faces constant rejection and ridicule, she represents the part of ourselves we're most insecure about. But the show's portrayal of her suffering is so exaggerated that it becomes therapeutic rather than depressing. It's like having your own adolescent anxieties reflected back to you in such an extreme way that they lose their power to hurt you. Chris Griffin, the dim-witted but kind-hearted son, provides another layer of comfort. His innocence and genuine sweetness create moments of unexpected warmth throughout the show. When everything else is cynical and sarcastic, Chris offers glimpses of pure, uncomplicated emotion. These moments work like pressure valves, releasing tension just when the cynicism might become overwhelming. The show's relationship with pop culture creates a unique viewing experience that's perfect for repeat watching. The references span decades, from obscure 70s television shows to current internet memes. This means different jokes land differently depending on your age, mood, and current knowledge base. You can watch the same episode multiple times and discover new layers, but the discovery process is gentle and rewarding rather than demanding. Family Guy's animation style contributes to its sleep friendliness in subtle but important ways. The character designs are simple and rounded, avoiding sharp angles or jarring visual elements that might startle viewers. The color palette is warm and familiar, dominated by the cozy yellows and browns of the Griffin home. Even during action sequences or fantastical cutaways, the visual style remains consistent and non-threatening. The show's musical elements deserve recognition too. From Stewie and Brian's elaborate musical numbers to Peter's improvised songs, music is woven throughout the series in ways that create rhythm and flow. These musical interludes often serve as natural breaking points, giving your brain permission to zone out or drift away. The songs are catchy enough to be memorable, but rarely complex enough to demand active listening. One of the most brilliant aspects of Family Guy's sleep appeal is its relationship with repetition. The show has been running for so long that certain gags and character interactions have become ritualistic. Peter fighting the giant chicken, Stewie's elaborate revenge plots against Lois, Brian's pretentious literary aspirations. These recurring elements create a sense of familiarity that can be deeply comforting for regular viewers. The show's approach to violence is another key factor. While there's plenty of cartoon violence, it's always presented in such an unrealistic way that it never feels genuinely threatening. Characters get blown up, shot, crushed, and dismembered, only to appear completely fine in the next scene. This consequence-free violence allows viewers to experience excitement and tension without any lasting anxiety. Let's talk about the show's treatment of mortality, because this might be the most important element for sleep viewing. Death appears frequently in Family Guy, but it's always treated as either temporary or comedic rather than genuinely tragic. Characters die and return, discuss death casually, and face mortal peril without real consequences. For viewers dealing with their own mortality anxieties, especially late at night, this approach can be surprisingly therapeutic. The writing style of Family Guy creates a unique rhythm that mirrors natural sleep patterns. Episodes often start with high-energy scenarios that gradually wind down through various subplots and cutaways. By the time you reach the resolution, the pacing has naturally slowed, making it easier to transition into actual sleep. It's like the show is designed to help you power down. Family Guy's relationship with nostalgia is complex and comforting. The show constantly references and parodies elements from decades past, creating a sense of collective cultural memory. Whether it's a reference to an 80s movie, a 70s television show, or a 90s commercial, these callbacks create connections to simpler times. For many viewers, this nostalgic element provides emotional comfort that eases the transition to sleep. The show's approach to relationships and romance offers another layer of sleep-friendly content. Despite all the dysfunction and crude humor, there are genuine moments of love and connection between characters. Peter and Lois, despite their constant conflicts, clearly love each other. Stewie and Brian, despite their differences, have formed an everyday, unlikely but deep friendship. These relationship dynamics provide emotional warmth without demanding too much investment. Here's something most people don't realize about Family Guy's structure. The show operates on multiple levels of engagement. You can watch it as pure background noise, letting the familiar voices and music wash over you. You can engage with the surface-level humor and sight gags. Or you can dive deep into the cultural references and character development. This flexibility makes it perfect for different stages of falling asleep. The show's treatment of everyday situations is particularly sleep-friendly. Many episodes revolve around mundane domestic issues like household chores, neighbor disputes, or family dinners that somehow spiral into elaborate adventures. But no matter how wild things get, they always return to the familiar setting of the Griffin home. This creates a sense of adventure within safety, excitement within security. Family Guy's approach to current events and social issues provides another comfort layer. The show comments on politics, social trends, and cultural phenomena, but always through the lens of cartoon absurdity. This allows viewers to engage with real-world concerns without the anxiety that usually accompanies such topics. It's like having a pressure release valve for contemporary stress. The show's episodic nature means you never have to worry about missing crucial plot developments if you fall asleep mid-episode. While there are occasionally multi-part episodes or recurring storylines, the vast majority of episodes are self-contained. This removes the anxiety about keeping up with complex narratives and allows your mind to relax completely. As we wrap up this deep dive into why Family Guy has become the ultimate sleep companion for millions of viewers, remember that comfort viewing is a deeply personal experience. What works for one person might not work for another. But there's something undeniably special about a show that can make you laugh, think, and ultimately feel at peace, all within the span of 22 minutes. The genius of Family Guy as a sleep aid lies in its perfect balance of engagement and relaxation. It's stimulating enough to occupy your conscious mind and prevent anxious thoughts from taking over, but familiar and comforting enough to allow your subconscious to begin the journey towards sleep. Whether you're drawn to Stewie's elaborate schemes, Peter's childlike wonder, or Brian's philosophical musings, there's something in this animated chaos for everyone. So the next time you find yourself reaching for that remote at bedtime, remember that you're not just choosing mindless entertainment. You're selecting a carefully crafted comfort blanket that's helped millions of people transition from the stresses of the day into peaceful rest. Sweet dreams, and remember, in Quahog, everything always works out in the end. Have you ever wondered why millions of people fall asleep to Family Guy every single night? Tonight, I'm diving deep into this bizarre internet phenomenon that's taken over bedrooms worldwide. We're talking about random Family Guy episodes specifically curated for sleep, and trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why this animated chaos has become the ultimate sleep soundtrack for an entire generation. Before we jump into this rabbit hole, let me ask you something. How many of you have tried falling asleep to complete silence, only to find your brain racing with thoughts? Or maybe you've attempted those boring nature sounds that somehow make you feel more awake than relaxed. Well, you're not alone. And that's exactly where our story begins. The Family Guy sleep phenomenon isn't just some random internet trend. It's a psychological masterpiece that accidentally stumbled upon the perfect formula for shutting down an overactive mind. Think about it. When you're lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, what's your biggest enemy? Your own thoughts. Your brain wants to replay every embarrassing moment from middle school, plan tomorrow's meetings, or suddenly solve world hunger. But Family Guy? It gives your mind something familiar yet unpredictable to focus on, creating the perfect distraction cocktail. Let me paint you a picture of how this whole thing works. You're scrolling through YouTube at midnight, exhausted but somehow still wired. You stumble across a video titled Family Guy Random Episodes No Ads Perfect for Sleep, with like 3 million views. You click it, thinking you'll watch for maybe 10 minutes. Next thing you know, you're waking up 8 hours later with your phone battery dead and Peter Griffin's voice somehow embedded in your dreams. The genius of Family Guy as sleep content lies in its complete unpredictability, wrapped in comfortable familiarity. You've probably seen most episodes before, so there's no pressure to follow. Along with complex plot lines, your brain can just drift along with the familiar voices and random cutaway gags without feeling like it's missing something important. It's like having background conversation at a party where you don't need to participate, but the noise keeps your mind occupied enough to relax. Now, let's talk about why random episodes work better than watching the show normally. When you're actively watching Family Guy during the day, you're engaged with the jokes, the storylines, and the visual gags. But when it's sleep time, you need something that provides just enough stimulation to quiet your thoughts without keeping you awake. Random episodes create this perfect sweet spot because there's no narrative continuity to follow. Your brain doesn't have to work to connect plot points or remember character developments. It can just float along with whatever chaos is happening on screen. The audio quality of these sleep compilations is crucial too. Most creators who make Family Guy sleep content understand that the volume needs to be just right. Not so loud that sudden outbursts wake you up, but not so quiet that you're straining to hear. They often remove the louder musical segments and focus on dialogue-heavy scenes. It's like they've accidentally created the perfect white noise machine, except instead of ocean sounds, it's Stewie plotting world domination. Here's something fascinating about the psychology behind this phenomenon. Sleep researchers have found that consistent, familiar sounds can actually improve sleep quality by masking disruptive noises and giving the brain something predictable to tune out. Family Guy provides this consistency through its familiar character voices and recurring joke structures, while the randomness prevents your brain from getting too invested in following along. The comment sections on these videos are absolutely incredible. You'll find thousands of people sharing their sleep stories, talking about how they've been falling asleep to the same episodes for years, or how they can identify exactly which episode they fell asleep to based on what they remember hearing. There's this whole community of people who've basically turned Family Guy into their personal sleep medication, and they're all supporting each other's weird sleep habits. What's really interesting is how this has evolved beyond just Family Guy. You'll find similar content for shows like The Simpsons, South Park, and even The Office. But Family Guy seems to have the perfect storm of elements that make it ideal for sleep content. The show's humor doesn't rely heavily on visual gags, so you're not missing much with your eyes closed. The characters have distinct, recognizable voices that create a comforting audio landscape, and the show's episodic nature means you can jump in anywhere without feeling lost. The creators of these sleep compilations have become masters of their craft. They know exactly which episodes work best, which scenes to include or skip, and how to balance the audio levels for optimal sleep induction. Some even create custom transitions between episodes to eliminate jarring cuts that might wake viewers up. It's like they're running a sophisticated sleep laboratory, except their test subjects are millions of insomniacs scrolling YouTube at 2 in the morning. Let's dive into the science behind why this actually works. When you're trying to fall asleep, your brain goes through different stages of consciousness. During the transition from wakefulness to sleep, your mind is particularly susceptible to intrusive thoughts and anxiety. Having familiar, low-stakes audio content provides what sleep experts call cognitive load distribution. Essentially, you're giving your brain something harmless to process, instead of letting it spiral into worry or excitement. The repetitive nature of Family Guy's humor structure also plays a role. The show follows predictable patterns: setup, punchline, cutaway, gag, back to story. This rhythm becomes almost hypnotic when you're in a relaxed state. Your brain starts to anticipate these patterns, which can actually trigger the relaxation response and help transition you into deeper sleep stages. But here's where it gets really interesting. Many people report having the weirdest, most vivid dreams when they fall asleep to Family Guy. This makes sense from a neuroscience perspective. During REM sleep, your brain is still processing auditory information, and the random, surreal content from the show can influence your dream narratives. People describe dreams where they're hanging out with the Griffin family, or experiencing bizarre adventures that feel like extended Family Guy cutaway gags. The social aspect of this phenomenon can't be ignored either. There's something comforting about knowing that thousands of other people are falling asleep to the same content. It creates this invisible community of shared experience. You're not alone in your weird sleep habits, because apparently everyone else is doing it too. The comment sections become these strange support groups where people bond over their favorite episodes to fall asleep to, or share stories about how the show has helped them through difficult times. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. Is falling asleep to TV shows actually healthy? Sleep experts have mixed opinions on this. Some argue that any screen time before bed disrupts your natural circadian rhythms and that the blue light from devices interferes with melatonin production. Others acknowledge that for people with anxiety or racing thoughts, having consistent background audio can actually improve sleep quality compared to lying awake in silence for hours. The key seems to be in the execution. The most successful Family Guy sleep content creators understand the importance of audio-only engagement. They often recommend turning your phone face down or using the video purely as an audio source. Some even create audio-only versions specifically designed for sleep, removing any visual elements that might keep you engaged. What's particularly clever about the no-captions approach that many of these videos advertise is that it eliminates another potential distraction. Captions, while helpful for accessibility, can keep your eyes engaged and prevent that crucial transition into sleep mode. By removing them, creators ensure that once you close your eyes, you're purely in audio mode. The algorithm has definitely caught on to this trend. YouTube's recommendation system has become incredibly sophisticated at identifying sleep content and serving it to users who are likely to engage with it during late-night browsing sessions. This has created a whole ecosystem of sleep-focused content creators who specialize in curating the perfect bedtime entertainment. The timing of when people discover this content is usually pretty consistent. It typically happens during periods of high stress, major life changes, or when dealing with insomnia. College students preparing for finals, people going through breakups, individuals dealing with work stress, or anyone experiencing major life transitions often find themselves searching for ways to quiet their minds at bedtime. There's also something to be said about nostalgia playing a role in this phenomenon. Family Guy has been on the air for over 2 decades, which means many of the people using it for sleep content grew up with the show. There's a comfort in those familiar voices and jokes that connects to childhood feelings of safety and routine. It's like having a weird, inappropriate bedtime story that somehow works perfectly for adult anxieties. The production quality of these sleep compilations has evolved significantly over the years. Early versions were often just random episode uploads with inconsistent audio levels and jarring transitions. Now, you'll find carefully curated content with smooth transitions, optimized audio, levels, and strategic episode selection designed specifically for sleep enhancement. Some creators even remove the most jarring sound effects or explosive moments that might disrupt sleep. What's fascinating is how this has influenced the broader landscape of sleep content on YouTube. You'll now find entire channels dedicated to creating sleep-friendly versions of popular shows, and the techniques pioneered by Family Guy sleep content creators have been adopted across different types of media. The success of this format has proven that there's a massive audience for familiar, low-stakes entertainment designed specifically for bedtime consumption. The psychological comfort provided by these videos extends beyond just the audio content. Many users report that having the video running creates a sense of presence, like they're not alone in their bedroom. This can be particularly helpful for people who live alone or are dealing with anxiety about being by themselves at night. The familiar characters become like imaginary roommates, providing background chatter. As we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Family Guy sleep content, it's clear that this phenomenon represents something much bigger than just a weird internet trend. It's a collective solution to a modern problem that millions of people face every night. In our hyper-connected, always-on world, our brains often struggle to shut down when it's time for sleep. These carefully curated random episodes provide exactly what many people need: a familiar, comforting, and just engaging enough audio landscape to help transition from the chaos of daily life into peaceful sleep. Whether you're already part of this strange community or you're curious to try it for yourself, remember that good sleep hygiene is ultimately about finding what works for your individual needs. For millions of people, that apparently involves falling asleep to the dysfunctional antics of the Griffin family. And honestly, in a world full of sleeping problems, that seems perfectly reasonable to me. So tonight, when you're lying in bed with your mind racing, maybe give it a try. Search for Family Guy random episodes for sleep and see if this bizarre internet phenomenon might just be the solution to your bedtime struggles. Sweet dreams, and remember, if Peter Griffin can fall asleep anywhere, so can you. Hey there, sleep seekers and Family Guy fans. Ever lie awake wondering just how many ridiculous jobs Peter Griffin has actually had throughout the series? Well, grab your pillow and get comfortable, because we're about to dive into the wonderfully chaotic career history of Quahog's most incompetent resident. From safety inspector to Supreme Court justice, Peter's resume reads like a fever dream, and tonight we're exploring every single bizarre position this man has somehow managed to stumble into. Picture this. You're at a job interview, and they ask where you see yourself in 5 years. Most people have a reasonable answer. Peter Griffin? Well, let's just say his interview skills are about as polished as his decision-making abilities. Yet somehow, this man has held more jobs than most people even know exist. Tonight's journey through Peter's professional mishaps is perfect for those late-night moments when you need something absurdly entertaining to drift off to. Let's start with what might be considered Peter's most stable employment, though that's not saying much. His original gig as a safety inspector at the Happy-Go-Lucky Toy Factory sounds straightforward enough. Stand around, inspect toys, make sure they're safe for children. Simple, right? Wrong. This is Peter Griffin we're talking about. Even the most basic task becomes an opportunity for spectacular failure. The man whose job it was to ensure toy safety somehow found ways to make everything less safe just by being there. From toy inspection, Peter moved on to what became his longest-running employment adventure, working at the Pawtucket Brewery. Now, there's something almost poetic about Peter working at the place where his beloved Pawtucket Patriot Ale is crafted. It's like a beer enthusiast getting a job at their favorite brewery, except instead of bringing passion and expertise to the role, Peter brought his unique talent for turning any situation into chaos. On his very first day, he managed to get drunk during work hours, setting the tone for what would become years of questionable workplace behavior. The medical field has also been graced by Peter's presence, though patients probably weren't thrilled about it. During a citywide flu outbreak, when the hospital was desperately short-staffed, Peter volunteered as a nurse. This might seem noble until you discover his approach to medical care. Turns out, Peter had been faking his way through nursing duties because he was afraid of needles. Imagine being sick in the hospital and finding out your nurse has been pretending to give you medication because he's squeamish about basic medical equipment. But Peter's medical career didn't end with nursing. He somehow also worked as a doctor, which raises serious questions about the hospital's hiring practices. His approach to emergency medicine was about as effective as you'd expect. When someone's life hung in the balance, Peter's solution involved methods that would make actual medical professionals question their career choices. Law enforcement has also experienced the Peter Griffin effect. In one memorable stint, he became a sheriff in a small southern town after the Griffin family was relocated by the FBI. The job description perfectly matched Peter's skill set: hang out, eat pie, and get drunk. For once, Peter had found employment that aligned with his natural abilities. Of course, even the simplest law enforcement duties became complicated when filtered through Peter's unique worldview. His artistic side emerged when he worked as a police sketch artist. While most people struggled with Peter's unconventional artistic interpretations, his sketches turned out to be surprisingly accurate. Sometimes, raw talent manifests in the most unexpected ways, even when that talent belongs to someone who approaches every task with the subtlety of a freight train. Peter has also dabbled in hospitality, working as a motel housekeeper. His customer service approach involved inserting himself into situations where he absolutely wasn't welcome, demonstrating a complete lack of understanding about personal boundaries and professional behavior. Guests probably didn't expect their housekeeper to become an active participant in their private moments. The detective business got a taste of Peter's investigative skills when he worked as a private investigator. His noir-style internal monologue painted him as a hard-boiled detective struggling to make ends meet, but his actual investigative methods were about as sophisticated as his approach to everything else. Still, there's something charming about Peter's attempt to channel classic detective fiction, even if the execution left much to be desired. Peter's relationship with food has led to several career opportunities. He became president of the National Association for the Advancement of Fat People, turning his personal struggles with weight into a leadership role. This position actually led to some heroic moments, proving that even Peter's most self-serving endeavors can occasionally produce positive outcomes. The fishing industry experienced Peter's unique management style when he decided to become a professional fisherman. Despite having zero experience on the water, Peter approached commercial fishing with his characteristic confidence. His nautical adventures proved that enthusiasm alone isn't enough to master the complexities of maritime work, especially when that enthusiasm is accompanied by a complete lack of relevant skills. Agriculture also felt Peter's impact when he tried his hand at farming. Moving the family to the countryside for a simpler life seemed like a reasonable plan until reality set in. Farming requires knowledge, patience, and hard work, qualities that don't align with Peter's approach to life. The fact that they failed to grow a single sellable crop shouldn't surprise anyone familiar with Peter's track record. Education has been both blessed and cursed by Peter's involvement. He served as an interim principal at James Woods High, stepping in during a staffing crisis. While his administrative methods were unconventional, he did manage some positive moments, like standing up to bullies. However, his interpretation of appropriate principal behavior included outdated social media challenges and questionable disciplinary approaches. Peter also won a campaign to become school board president, though his victory came through a smear campaign against his own wife. His tenure in educational leadership was marked by the same chaos that characterizes all his endeavors, proving that putting Peter in charge of anything, especially children's education, requires a level of optimism that borders on delusion. The restaurant business has provided Peter with multiple opportunities to combine his love of food with his entrepreneurial spirit. He and Lois opened Big Pete's House of Munch, using money from a valuable coin they discovered. Restaurant ownership taught Peter that loving food and successfully serving it to customers are entirely different skills. The establishment struggled from day one, with Peter's customer service philosophy clashing with basic business principles. Not content with traditional restaurants, Peter also operated a food truck called Eat My Junk. His mobile food service brought his unique culinary vision directly to the streets, complete with creative payment processing methods that probably violated several health and business regulations. The food truck experiment demonstrated that changing venues doesn't necessarily improve outcomes when the fundamental approach remains chaotic. Environmental activism became Peter's focus when he created Gary, the no-trash cougar, a character designed to combat pollution. His environmental education methods were somewhat traumatic for young audiences, proving that good intentions don't automatically translate to effective execution. Sometimes the message gets lost when the messenger approaches their mission with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Law enforcement experienced Peter's unique perspective again when he volunteered as a cop during a staffing shortage. Giving Peter police powers was probably one of Quahog's more questionable decisions. His interpretation of police work involved creative approaches to evidence handling and suspect interaction that would make actual officers reconsider their career choices. Corporate leadership has also been shaped by Peter's influence. When he temporarily took over as CEO of his father-in-law's company, his business philosophy involved firing experienced executives and replacing them with his drinking buddies. His product development ideas were equally revolutionary, though perhaps not in ways that traditional business schools would recommend. The tobacco industry briefly benefited from Peter's advocacy when he served as president of El Dorado Cigarette Company. His approach to corporate leadership in this role was refreshingly straightforward: show up, sit in the office, and use his position to influence legislation. Sometimes the simplest job descriptions are the most honest. Political service has called upon Peter's talents multiple times. He worked as a press secretary, though his duties seemed to focus more on preventing static electricity than managing media relations. His understanding of political communication was about as nuanced as his approach to everything else, which is to say, not very nuanced at all. The entertainment industry has provided Peter with various opportunities to showcase his talents. He worked as a Calvin Klein model at some point in his past, proving that even Peter's physical appearance has commercial value under the right circumstances. He's also appeared in television commercials, though his performance skills might not lead to repeat bookings. Military service appears somewhere in Peter's background, though his understanding of combat protocols and chain of command was typically unconventional. His military training focused on identifying friendly forces, a concept he struggled to grasp despite repeated instruction. Telecommunications offered Peter work in telemarketing, though his target demographic was somewhat specialized. His phone skills were about as effective as you'd expect, with customer interaction following his usual pattern of creating confusion where none previously existed. Medical experimentation provided Peter with income opportunities when he volunteered for various research studies. The compensation was decent, though the side effects of participating in multiple experiments simultaneously probably weren't covered in the consent forms he definitely didn't read carefully. The hospitality industry experienced Peter's customer service philosophy when he worked various service positions. His approach to taking orders involved creative interpretations of restaurant terminology that probably confused both customers and kitchen staff. His ability to remember and accurately communicate simple requests was challenged by his tendency to overcomplicate straightforward interactions. Emergency services have been both helped and hindered by Peter's involvement. His stint as a firefighter demonstrated that good intentions and basic safety training don't always combine effectively. Sometimes the person meant to solve the problem becomes part of the problem, especially when that person approaches emergency response with Peter's unique logic. Entertainment production has benefited from Peter's creative vision. He developed television programming with the same innovative approach he brings to everything else. His understanding of audience preferences and production logistics was typically unconventional, resulting in content that probably challenged viewers' expectations in unexpected ways. Transportation services experienced Peter's customer service approach when he worked as an Uber driver. His vehicle, the situation was unconventional, and his interpersonal skills with passengers followed his established pattern of creating memorable experiences for all the wrong reasons. The pharmaceutical industry relied on Peter's expertise when he worked as a pharmacist. His approach to medication distribution and patient consultation demonstrated his unique interpretation of healthcare delivery. Customers probably received more than they bargained for in terms of personalized service, Seasonal employment has provided Peter with opportunities to spread joy as a mall Santa. His interaction with children during the holiday season showcased his gift for making lasting impressions, though not necessarily the kind that parents hope for when they bring their kids to meet Santa. Domestic management became Peter's responsibility when he worked as a house husband. His approach to household organization and family care demonstrated skills that had been hidden beneath years of workplace chaos. Sometimes the right job brings out unexpected competencies, even in the most unlikely candidates. Judicial service elevated Peter to the Supreme Court, where his legal philosophy focused on equality through unconventional means. His approach to constitutional interpretation was characteristically innovative, challenging traditional legal thinking with solutions that probably weren't covered in law school. Specialized services have utilized Peter's unique skill set in various capacities. He's worked as everything from a babysitter to a personal shopper, bringing his distinctive approach to customer service in roles that required sensitivity and attention to detail. His clients probably received more personalized attention than they anticipated. Performance arts have provided Peter with outlets for his creative expression. His musical abilities have earned him income through various venues, from street performance to wedding entertainment. His understanding of audience engagement and musical technique follows his established pattern of prioritizing enthusiasm over conventional skill. The food service industry has experienced Peter's influence in multiple capacities, from restaurant ownership to catering services. His culinary philosophy emphasizes creativity over convention, resulting in dining experiences that challenge customers' expectations about food preparation and presentation. Public safety has relied on Peter's expertise in various specialized roles, from ninja police officer to volunteer emergency responder. His approach to crime prevention and emergency management demonstrates innovative thinking that probably wasn't covered in standard training programs. Media production has benefited from Peter's creative vision in multiple formats, from cartoon development to television production. His understanding of entertainment value and audience engagement follows his characteristic approach of prioritizing memorable experiences over conventional quality standards. As we wrap up this extensive journey through Peter Griffin's career history, it's clear that his professional life has been anything but boring. From safety inspector to Supreme Court justice, from nurse to ninja cop, Peter has approached every job with the same combination of enthusiasm and chaos that defines his character. His work history reads like a collection of workplace disasters, yet somehow he keeps finding new employment opportunities. What makes Peter's career journey so entertaining is his complete lack of awareness about his own limitations. He approaches brain surgery with the same confidence he brings to flipping burgers, and somehow manages to create memorable moments in every position he holds. His employers probably don't forget him quickly, though not necessarily for the reasons they'd prefer. The sheer variety of Peter's employment history suggests either an incredibly diverse skill set or an amazing ability to convince people to hire him, despite obvious red flags. The truth is probably somewhere in between, though the evidence strongly suggests that Peter's interview skills don't accurately represent his job performance capabilities. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, you can rest easy knowing that somewhere in the animated universe, Peter Griffin is probably starting a new job tomorrow, bringing his unique brand of workplace creativity to yet another unsuspecting industry. His career adventures remind us that sometimes the most entertaining stories come from the most unlikely sources, and that competence isn't always required for memorable employment experiences. Sweet dreams, and remember, no matter how chaotic your own work life gets, it's probably more manageable than Peter Griffin's professional journey through the working world of Quahog and beyond. Picture this. It's 2 a.m. You're tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. Your mind is racing with thoughts about tomorrow's responsibilities, that awkward conversation from 3 weeks ago, and whether you left the stove on. What you need isn't another meditation app or white noise machine. You need something perfectly mundane, yet oddly fascinating. You need random Family Guy facts that will occupy just enough of your brain to let sleep creep in without being so exciting that they keep you awake. Tonight we're diving into the wonderfully weird world of Quahog, with facts so specific and delightfully pointless that they'll have you drifting off faster than Peter Griffin at a feminist poetry reading. Let's start with something that sounds completely made up but is absolutely real. The chicken fights between Peter Griffin and Ernie the Giant Chicken have collectively lasted over 20 minutes of screen time across all episodes. 20 minutes. That's longer than most sitcom episodes dedicate to their main plot. These epic battles began over something so ridiculously petty that it perfectly encapsulates the show's absurdist humor. An expired coupon. Not a life-changing amount of money, not a family heirloom, but a piece of paper that saves you maybe 50 cents on chicken feed. Yet this trivial dispute has spawned some of the most elaborate and destructive fight sequences in television history. The creators didn't plan for these fights to become a recurring element. The first chicken fight was supposed to be a one-off gag, but audience response was so positive that it became a signature element of the show. Each subsequent battle had to top the previous one in terms of scope and destruction. They've fought in the streets, crashed through buildings, battled in the sky, and even taken their conflict underwater. The animators spend weeks choreographing these sequences, treating them with the same attention to detail that major studios reserve for blockbuster action films. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's production process. Every episode of Family Guy requires approximately 15,000 individual drawings. In the digital age, this seems almost quaint, but the show maintains a hand-drawn aesthetic that demands incredible attention to detail. Each character's movement, each facial expression, each background element starts as a pencil sketch. The animators have developed shortcuts and techniques over the years, but the fundamental process remains surprisingly labor-intensive. The voice actors record their lines before any animation begins, which means the animators have to match the drawings to the vocal performances rather than the other way around. This creates some interesting challenges. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple characters, and he often has conversations with himself during recording sessions. The sound engineers have become experts at seamlessly blending these multi-character performances, creating the illusion that Peter, Brian, and Stewie are actually in the same room talking to each other. Speaking of voices, here's a fact that demonstrates just how integral Seth MacFarlane is to the show's DNA. He voices 4 main characters, plus dozens of recurring characters and one-off personalities. When he temporarily stepped back from the show to focus on other projects, the producers seriously considered ending Family Guy rather than recasting his roles. They eventually found ways to work around his reduced availability, but it highlighted how deeply connected the show is to MacFarlane's specific vocal talents and comedic sensibilities. The show's relationship with censorship has produced some genuinely bizarre situations over the years. There are jokes that were cut from the television broadcast but restored for DVD releases, creating alternate versions of episodes that exist in different formats. Some episodes have different running times, depending on where and how you watch them. The censors have made requests that seem arbitrary to outside observers. Violence is often acceptable, but certain types of language or visual gags get flagged for removal. This has led to some creative workarounds by the writing team. They've developed a sort of code for getting controversial material past the censors. Sometimes they'll include an extremely offensive joke that they know will be rejected, making their actually intended joke seem mild by comparison. It's a psychological negotiation tactic that has become part of their standard writing process. Here's something that sounds like trivia, but actually reveals something profound about how the show is made. The writer's room keeps a collection of rejected joke ideas that they call the too weird pile. These aren't jokes that are too offensive or inappropriate, but rather concepts that are so strange or specific that they don't fit into any episode. Occasionally, they'll build an entire storyline around one of these orphaned ideas, which explains why some episodes feel like fever dreams that shouldn't work but somehow do. The show's approach to celebrity cameos is more strategic than it might appear. When famous people appear as themselves, they're usually playing exaggerated versions of their public personas rather than trying to seem likable or relatable. The writers deliberately lean into whatever characteristic or controversy that celebrity is known for, creating appearances that feel more like roasts than typical guest spots. This approach has occasionally caused problems when celebrities change their minds about how they want to be portrayed, leading to last-minute script changes or even canceled episodes. Family Guy's relationship with its own continuity is fascinatingly inconsistent. The writers will sometimes reference events from episodes that aired years earlier, demonstrating that they do pay attention to their own history. But they'll just as often completely ignore or contradict previously established facts about the characters or their world. This isn't laziness or poor planning, but rather a deliberate choice to prioritize individual episode quality over series-long consistency. The animation team has developed a visual shorthand for different types of scenes that regular viewers might not consciously notice but definitely feel. Flashback sequences use slightly different color palettes and animation techniques. Dream sequences have their own visual language. Even the way characters move changes depending on whether a scene is meant to be realistic or cartoonish within the show's already cartoonish world. Here's a production detail that reveals how much thought goes into seemingly throwaway moments. Background characters and crowd scenes aren't just randomly generated. The animators create specific individuals with their own implied backstories, even though these characters might only appear for a few seconds. They've developed a whole population of Quahog residents who appear in multiple episodes, creating an illusion of a lived-in community, even though most viewers would never consciously recognize these recurring background players. The show's musical numbers require a completely different production pipeline from regular episodes. They start with Seth MacFarlane or other musically inclined staff members creating rough recordings of the songs. Then professional arrangers develop full orchestrations. The voice actors record their vocals to these arrangements. Only after all the music is complete do the animators begin creating visuals to match. This process can take months for a single musical sequence, which explains why these segments often feel more polished and elaborate than the surrounding episode. Family Guy's approach to holiday episodes reveals something interesting about how the writers view their own show. They treat holiday specials as opportunities to experiment with different formats or storytelling techniques. Rather than simply plugging their characters into traditional holiday scenarios, Christmas episodes might be musicals, Halloween episodes might be horror parodies, and so on. This keeps the show from falling into the predictable patterns that plague many long-running series. The show's merchandise presents some unique challenges because of how the characters are designed. Peter Griffin's proportions don't translate well to three-dimensional objects, leading to action figures and toys that look subtly wrong. The merchandising team has had to develop modified character designs specifically for products, creating versions of the characters that maintain their essential appearance while being more practically manufacturable. Here's something that demonstrates the show's attention to detail in unexpected areas. The writers have created complete backstories for characters who have never appeared on screen. They know the names and personalities of Brian's parents, even though this information has never been relevant to any episode. They've developed detailed histories for minor recurring characters that extend far beyond anything that's ever been shown. This background work helps maintain consistency in how these characters behave, even when they're only making brief appearances. The show's relationship with its own spin-offs created some interesting continuity challenges. When the Cleveland show was in production, storylines had to be coordinated between writing teams to ensure that Cleveland's appearances on Family Guy didn't contradict what was happening on his own show. This led to some awkward scheduling situations where episodes had to be rewritten or delayed to maintain consistency across both series. Family Guy's approach to celebrity deaths has evolved over the years in response to changing cultural sensitivities. Early episodes would sometimes include jokes about recently deceased public figures, but the writers now generally avoid this territory. Unless enough time has passed for such references to feel like historical commentary rather than current events humor. This self-imposed guideline has prevented some potentially awkward situations where episodes would have aired shortly after unexpected celebrity deaths. The show's animators have developed specialized techniques for different types of scenes that regular viewers probably don't notice but contribute to the overall viewing experience. Fight scenes use different frame rates and animation principles than dialogue scenes. Fantasy sequences might employ completely different artistic styles. The animators treat each type of scene as requiring its own approach, making Family Guy more visually diverse than many people realize. Here's a fact that illustrates how deeply the show has embedded itself in popular culture. The writers receive hundreds of suggestions from fans every week, ranging from episode ideas to character suggestions to complaints about plot inconsistencies. While they can't use fan-submitted ideas for legal reasons, these communications help them understand how their audience perceives the show and what elements are most popular or problematic. The show's approach to social media and internet culture has changed dramatically over its run. Early episodes barely acknowledged the existence of the internet, while recent seasons treat social media and online culture as fundamental aspects of modern life. The writers have had to learn new forms of humor and reference that didn't exist when the show began, essentially evolving their comedy style to match changing technology and communication patterns. Family Guy's international versions present fascinating translation challenges. Jokes that rely on American cultural references or wordplay often can't be directly translated, leading to completely different jokes in dubbed versions. Some countries have created culturally specific versions of certain episodes, replacing American references with local equivalents. This has resulted in versions of Family Guy that are almost entirely different shows while maintaining the same basic characters and plot lines. The show's writers maintain detailed style guides that specify how each character speaks, what types of references they would make, and how they would react in different situations. These guides help maintain consistency across different writers and ensure that characters don't drift too far from their established personalities. Brian's dialogue, for example, follows specific patterns that reflect his pretentious intellectual aspirations, while Chris's speech patterns reflect his slower mental processing speed. Here's something that reveals the show's commitment to its own absurdist logic. The writers have created internal rules for how the show's universe works that they follow even when these rules are never explicitly stated. They know how long it takes to travel between different locations in Quahog, which characters know each other, and what each character's financial situation is like. This background consistency helps ground even the most ridiculous storylines in something resembling reality. The show's merchandise licensing deals have created some genuinely strange products over the years. There have been Family Guy-themed everything from breakfast cereals to car accessories to wedding decorations. The licensing team has to consider whether each potential product fits with the show's brand, leading to some philosophical discussions about what Family Guy represents as a cultural entity beyond just a television program. Family Guy's approach to controversial topics has become more sophisticated over the years, moving from simple shock value toward more nuanced satirical commentary. The writers now spend considerable time researching topics before writing about them, ensuring that their jokes come from a place of understanding rather than ignorance. This doesn't mean they avoid controversial subjects, but rather that they approach them with more intentionality. The show's animators have developed a visual signature that makes Family Guy immediately recognizable, even in brief clips or promotional materials. This involves not just character design but also choices about color palettes, camera angles, and motion principles. New animators joining the team have to learn these specific techniques to ensure visual consistency across different episodes and seasons. Here's a production detail that most viewers would never think about, but significantly impacts the viewing experience. The show's sound design team creates distinct audio signatures for different characters and locations. Peter's footsteps sound different from Brian's. The Griffin house has its own acoustic characteristics, and even the way doors close varies depending on the context. These subtle audio cues help create the illusion of a consistent physical world, even though everything is animated. As you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in the world, animators are drawing the next batch of Family Guy episodes, voice actors are recording dialogue for situations that don't exist, and writers are debating whether jokes about topics you've never considered are funny enough to include in a television show. The machinery of entertainment continues turning even while you rest, creating the content that will occupy your mind during tomorrow night's journey toward sleep. Sweet dreams. And remember that in the grand scheme of things, we're all just characters in someone else's animated universe, trying to make sense of the absurd situations we find ourselves in. Hey there, night owls and Family Guy fanatics. If you're settling in for some sleep but your brain is still buzzing, you've clicked on the perfect video. Tonight we're diving deep into the wonderfully weird world of Quahog, with some absolutely wild Family Guy facts that'll either lull you to sleep or keep you awake, pondering the bizarre genius of Seth MacFarlane's creation. Picture this scenario. You're lying in bed, eyes getting heavy, but your mind keeps wandering. Maybe you're thinking about that awkward conversation you had at work, or wondering why you ate that entire bag of chips for dinner. Well, forget all that mundane stuff because we're about to embark on a journey through 20 years of Family Guy madness that's guaranteed to give your brain something much more entertaining to chew on. Let's start with something that might surprise you about the show's origins. When Seth MacFarlane first pitched Family Guy, he was just 24 years old and working at Hanna-Barbera. The network executives were so impressed with his 15-minute pilot that they ordered the series on the spot. But here's the kicker. MacFarlane had never actually run a television show before. He was essentially handed the keys to a multi-million-dollar production with zero experience as a showrunner. Talk about fake it till you make it. Speaking of MacFarlane, did you know he was supposed to be on one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center on September 11th? He had a ticket for American Airlines Flight 11, but overslept after a night of drinking and missed the flight by just 10 minutes. When he arrived at the airport and learned what had happened, he realized how close he'd come to never creating the Griffin family we know and love today. It's one of those sliding door moments that makes you think about how different pop culture would be if he'd caught that flight. Now let's talk about Brian Griffin, the family's intellectual dog who walks on 2 legs and drives a Prius. Brian's character was actually inspired by MacFarlane's own dog, also named Brian, who passed away in the early 2000s. The real Brian was a white Labrador retriever, and MacFarlane has said that losing him was one of the most difficult experiences of his life. When the show temporarily killed off cartoon Brian in 2013, the fan backlash was so intense that MacFarlane received death threats. People were legitimately angry about a fictional dog's death, which says something about how attached viewers had become to these animated characters. The temporary death of Brian actually serves as a perfect example of how deeply fans connect with Family Guy's characters, even though they're supposed to be parodies and caricatures. When Brian was hit by a car and replaced by a new dog named Vinny, voiced by Tony Sirico from The Sopranos, social media exploded with outrage. There were online petitions, angry tweets, and even real-world protests. The writers had planned to bring Brian back all along. It was meant to be a multi-episode arc exploring how the family would cope with loss, but the reaction was so overwhelmingly negative that they cut the storyline short and resurrected Brian after just 2 episodes. Here's something that might blow your mind about the show's production process. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 10 months to create, from start to finish. That means when you're watching a new episode that just aired, the writers were working on the initial script almost a year ago. This long production timeline sometimes creates weird situations where the show references current events that are no longer current by the time the episode airs, or misses major cultural moments entirely because they couldn't pivot quickly enough. The cutaway gags that Family Guy is famous for were actually born out of necessity rather than creative choice. In the early seasons, episodes would often run short, and the writers needed quick ways to fill time. These random flashbacks and non-sequitur scenes were easy to animate and didn't require complex storytelling or character development. What started as a time-filling technique became the show's signature storytelling device, copied by countless other animated series. Let's dive into some character-specific weirdness. Stewie Griffin's distinctive football-shaped head wasn't originally intended to be football-shaped at all. MacFarlane has said that Stewie's head design was meant to evoke a more oval, egg-like shape that would make him look unnatural and slightly alien. The football comparison only came up after the character was already established, and now it's impossible to unsee. Stewie's sexuality has been a topic of debate among fans for years, but MacFarlane has given conflicting answers about whether the baby is gay, straight, or something else entirely. In some interviews, he suggested that Stewie is gay, while in others, he said the character is too young for sexual orientation to be relevant. The ambiguity seems to be intentional, allowing viewers to interpret the character however they want while keeping the writers free to take Stewie in any direction the story demands. Peter Griffin's voice is actually just Seth MacFarlane doing an impression of a security guard he knew growing up in Connecticut. The guard worked at the animation studio where MacFarlane interned during college, and he would do this exaggerated New England accent that MacFarlane found hilarious. Years later, when he needed a voice for Peter, he remembered that security guard and based the entire character's speech pattern on him. The show's relationship with censorship has always been complicated and fascinating. While Family Guy pushes boundaries constantly, there are still certain words and topics that are completely off limits for broadcast television. The writers have developed an entire arsenal of creative workarounds, using sound effects, cutaways, and strategic editing to suggest things they can't show explicitly. Sometimes the censored version is actually funnier than what they originally wrote because the restrictions force them to be more creative. Cleveland Brown's spin-off series, The Cleveland Show, was actually planned before Family Guy was even renewed for its 4th season. MacFarlane and the writers knew they wanted to explore Cleveland's character more deeply, but they weren't sure Family Guy would survive long enough to make it happen. When the show came back from cancellation stronger than ever, they were able to move forward with Cleveland's solo series, though it only lasted 4 seasons before Cleveland returned to Quahog. The character of Meg Griffin has gone through more voice actress changes than any other main character on the show. Lacey Chabert voiced Meg for the first season and part of the second, but left due to scheduling conflicts with her film career. Mila Kunis took over the role and has been playing Meg ever since, but many fans still don't realize there was ever a different voice actress. Interestingly, Kunis was only 15 when she started voicing Meg, making her younger than the character she was playing. Family Guy's cancellation and resurrection story is one of the most unusual in television history. The show was canceled after just 3 seasons due to low ratings, but DVD sales and syndication reruns on Adult Swim introduced it to a whole new audience. The ratings for the reruns were actually higher than the ratings for new episodes had been when the show first aired. This success convinced Fox to bring the show back, making Family Guy the first canceled series to be revived purely based on DVD sales and cable reruns. The show's animation style has evolved significantly over the years, though casual viewers might not notice the changes. Early episodes were animated using traditional cell animation techniques, while current episodes are created entirely using digital animation software. The digital process allows for more complex visual effects and faster production times, but some longtime fans argue that the hand-drawn episodes had a warmer, more organic feel. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's writing process. Despite Family Guy's reputation for random stream-of-consciousness humor, every single cutaway gag and non-sequitur moment is carefully planned and scripted. The writers spend weeks crafting these seemingly spontaneous moments, testing them with focus groups and refining them until they hit just the right note of absurdity. What feels effortlessly random is actually the result of meticulous preparation and timing. The character of Quagmire was originally going to be named Quahog, after the town where the Griffins live. But the writers realized that having a character and a location with the same name would be confusing for viewers, so they changed it to Quagmire at the last minute. The name Quagmire is actually a play on words, combining the idea of being stuck in a difficult situation with the character's, shall we say, adventurous romantic life. Death, the Grim Reaper character who occasionally appears on the show, was voiced by Norm Macdonald in his early appearances. Macdonald's deadpan delivery was perfect for the role, but scheduling conflicts meant he couldn't continue voicing the character regularly. Adam Carolla took over the role for several episodes before it eventually went to other voice actors. Death's inconsistent voice casting reflects one of the challenges of using celebrity guest stars for recurring characters. The show has featured some truly bizarre celebrity cameos over the years, but one of the strangest was Rush Limbaugh playing himself in an episode where Brian becomes conservative. Limbaugh recorded his lines during a commercial break of his radio show, and the writers had to work around his limited availability by keeping his dialogue minimal and straightforward. The episode aired during the height of Limbaugh's popularity, and his appearance generated significant media attention. Family Guy's approach to continuity is deliberately inconsistent, which allows the writers tremendous creative freedom, but sometimes confuses viewers who are paying close attention. Characters die and come back to life. Major events happen and are never mentioned again. And the timeline of the show makes absolutely no sense if you try to analyze it logically. This isn't accidental. The writers have explicitly said they prioritize individual episode quality over long-term story coherence. The show's merchandising success has been almost as impressive as its television ratings. Family Guy merchandise has generated hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, with everything from t-shirts and coffee mugs to video games and board games. The talking plush toys of Stewie and Brian were particularly popular, though they had to be carefully programmed to avoid saying anything too inappropriate for younger children who might play with them. One of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy's production is how they handle controversial episodes. The writers have an informal rating system for how potentially offensive each episode might be, and they adjust the marketing and promotion accordingly. Episodes that push boundaries harder than usual often air with less advanced publicity, allowing them to reach audiences without generating pre-broadcast controversy that might lead to censorship. The show's relationship with Fox network executives has been notoriously rocky over the years. MacFarlane has been vocal about his frustrations with network interference, and several episodes have included not-so-subtle jabs at Fox's programming decisions and corporate culture. Despite this tension, Family Guy remains one of Fox's most valuable properties, giving MacFarlane significant leverage in creative disputes. Here's a production detail that most viewers never think about, but affects every single episode. The timing of animated comedy is completely different from live-action comedy because animated characters can move and react in ways that real actors cannot. Jokes that would fall flat in live action can work perfectly in animation because the visual possibilities are unlimited. The writers and animators work closely together to ensure that the timing of visual gags matches the rhythm of the dialogue. The voice recording process for Family Guy is also unique in the animation world. Most animated shows record each actor separately, but Family Guy often brings the main cast together for group recording sessions. This allows for more natural interactions and improvisation, though it also makes the recording process more expensive and time-consuming. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple characters, so he sometimes has to have conversations with himself, switching between Peter, Brian, and Stewie within the same scene. As you're drifting off to sleep tonight, think about this final fact. Family Guy has now been on the air for over 2 decades, making it one of the longest-running animated series in television history. Kids who watched the first episode when it premiered in 1999 are now adults with children of their own. The show has outlasted multiple generations of network executives, survived cancellation, and adapted to completely different media landscapes, from broadcast television to streaming services. The Griffin family has become as familiar to many people as their own relatives, which is both impressive and slightly disturbing when you consider how dysfunctional that family actually is. But maybe that's the secret to Family Guy's enduring appeal. In a world where real families can be just as complicated and bizarre as the fictional ones we see on television, there's something comforting about knowing that no matter how weird your own family dynamics might be, at least you're not dealing with a talking baby who's constantly plotting world domination, and a dog who's writing the great American novel. Sweet dreams, and remember, life's a lot like Family Guy. Sometimes it makes perfect sense. Sometimes it's completely random, and sometimes you just have to go with it and hope for the best. Whether you're a longtime fan or a newcomer to the show, these facts give you a glimpse into the creative chaos that makes Family Guy such a unique entry in television history. Sleep well, and maybe you'll dream about Quahog tonight.